You're watching Inside the Americas, coming up. After the explosive testimony of Facebook whistleblower Frances Haugen, we'll look at how U.S. lawmakers could now choose to better regulate the social media giant. Then, one of the most surprising things to come out of the Pandora Papers was the status of South Dakota as a tax haven. The details on the way. And 10,000 pro-life protesters turn out in Mexico against a Supreme Court ruling that prevents women from being prosecuted for getting an abortion. I'm Jeannie Godula. Well, it was a bad week for Facebook. The social media giant saw a 6-hour outage of its own site, plus Instagram and WhatsApp. Facebook was also hit with testimony from former employee Frances Haugen, who slammed the company for prioritizing profit over protecting its users. Haugen urged the U.S. government to regulate social media to help tackle the crisis, with some members of Congress happy to oblige. Our Wasim Cornet takes a look.
Facebook ever found.
Congress will act, the words of determined lawmakers after the blistering testimony by whistleblower Frances Haugen, a former product manager at Facebook.
But I'm here today because I believe Facebook's products harm children, stoke division, and weaken our democracy. The company's leadership knows how to make Facebook and Instagram safer, but won't make the necessary changes because they have put their astronomical profits before people.
Facebook has denied these accusations. In a statement, CEO Mark Zuckerberg defended his company.
The argument that we deliberately push content that makes people angry for profit is deeply illogical. We make money from ads, and advertisers consistently tell us that they don't want their ads next to harmful or angry content.
The research from Facebook headquarters, however, shows the company is aware that spending lots of time on the platform can lead to anxiety, eating disorders, and even suicidal thoughts. The tech giant has also been accused of promoting hateful content and of not cracking down on calls for violence, like during the attack on the Capitol in Washington last January.
In our view, this is just the latest in a series of revelations about social media platforms that make clear that self-regulation is not working.
Frances Haugen spent 2 years with Facebook, and she is unequivocal. The company must be more transparent and share more data. And she thinks a regulator that would only deal with tech giants should be set up. But Facebook is a cornerstone of the U.S. economy, and regulating it could have geopolitical consequences.
The reality is, if you weaken an American company like Facebook, you're essentially giving free rein to a Chinese player, and Washington obviously doesn't want that.
One example is TikTok. Last year, it was the most downloaded app in the world, and it belongs to a Chinese company. The trade war between Washington and Beijing could threaten any kind of significant measures to regulate Facebook. Some 3.5 billion users use the company's platforms worldwide.
Our number of the week is this one, 367 billion. That is the incredible amount in dollars that the U.S. state of South Dakota has been sheltering for the world's rich and famous. The Pandora Papers that came out this week say the Midwestern state now rivals Switzerland, the Cayman Islands, and other famous tax havens as a key spot for the wealthy to protect their assets from tax authorities and other prying eyes. But why South Dakota? Our Inside the Americas reporters found out.
Their faces proudly carved into the rock. Washington, Jefferson, Roosevelt, and Lincoln preside from Mount Rushmore over South Dakota. But the sparsely populated state is less well known for housing the money of some of the world's mega rich. The Pandora Papers reveal that $367 billion are sitting in trusts based there. That's up from around $75 billion 10 years ago. Trusts are a legal structure that allow individuals to hide their assets behind a nominee's name, guaranteeing secrecy and anonymity. Like South Dakota, a dozen American states excel in preserving financial opaqueness, such as Delaware, where Joe Biden was senator, Wyoming, and Nevada. These jurisdictions also benefited from a law imposed on the Bahamas in 2018. Companies and certain trusts based there are now required to declare their beneficiaries, prompting investors to move their assets to the United States. Since January, though, a new American law requires the owners of shell companies to disclose their identities. The Pandora Papers revelations are embarrassing for President Biden, who in April pledged to crack down on tax avoidance.
The president is committed to bringing additional transparency to the United States, the U.S. and international financial systems, and you can see that in policies he's proposed and supported over the course of his presidency and even prior to that.
The only caveat is that the United States has refused to sign an OECD agreement on the sharing of banking information, a text signed by more than 100 jurisdictions, including the Cayman Islands and Luxembourg.
Southern California is still in cleanup mode after being hit with one of the biggest oil spills there in decades. These yellow floating barriers are meant to keep the oil from reaching the coast. Authorities say some 600,000 liters of oil may have seeped into the ocean already, damaging ecosystems and potentially shutting down beaches for months. Fraser Jackson takes a look.
Days after a pipeline rupture led to potentially 500,000 litres of oil leaking off California's Pacific coast, workers and volunteers are still trying to protect beaches and wildlife. Well over 1,000 are set to aid the cleanup as authorities race to figure out what caused the spillage. One latest theory is that a misplaced anchor ruptured and dragged a kilometre-long section of pipeline over 100 feet out of place. Local lawmakers used the spill to renew calls to reduce the US's dependency on oil.
This does not have to be our future. We understand extremes, not just extreme heat, but extreme weather, east to west. Well, you know why? Those damn platforms, fossil fuels. It's not very complicated. So we need to grow up, grow out of this dependency and this mindset that we can't do more and do better.
On top of the damage to the environment, business owners are holding their breath and already seeing the impacts.
I did have a table today that said they noticed people checking out of hotels. They had made hotel reservations here and they're checking out because they can't go to the beach. And most of our business is people from the hotels.
I know they're working on it, but I don't really know how long it will be. Some people we're saying months, but I'm like, there's no way.
There is some tentative good news, however. Environmentalists had feared the oil would devastate birds and marine life, but so far less than a dozen oil-covered birds have been found.
Next, for many women around the world, a Supreme Court ruling in favor of abortion is a good thing. But in the Catholic country of Mexico, a decision that would help decriminalize abortion pushed some 10,000 people into the streets. The Supreme Court decision opens the way for women across Mexico to get abortions without fear of prosecution. But those steps forward in the fight for women's rights have split the country in two.
The 38 weeks pregnant 15-year-old seen here on the left has just had an ultrasound in front of thousands of anti-abortion activists.
On the 22nd day, the heart starts beating.
Some 10,000 protesters were gathered in Mexico City on Sunday from all over the country, most of them devout Catholics. In some Mexican states, abortion is considered murder, and women face up to 3 years in prison. But last month, the Supreme Court ruled that this criminalization of abortion was unconstitutional, a decision that now paves the way for its legalization throughout the country.
What the government have done worries us. To give a right to abortion is to give a right to kill. And that is not what the majority of Mexicans want.
Just 4 of 32 Mexican states currently allow abortion, and that's up to 12 weeks of pregnancy. Elsewhere in the country, termination is only allowed in cases of rape, risks to the life of the mother, or birth defects. But in practice, the law isn't always applied. Some doctors refuse to carry out the procedure.
No one should be able to tell us what to do with our bodies. We haven't had this freedom, nor have our mothers and grandmothers, and future generations must live without this taboo.
Shortly after the Supreme Court's decision, the Mexican government said that those jailed for having allegedly terminated their pregnancy would be freed.
We don't talk a lot about NASCAR on the show, but there is certainly good reason to do so this week. Bubba Wallace became just the second black driver in history to win a race at the top level of the Elite Stock Car Series, and the first in almost 60 years. It was a huge win for the racer, both professionally and personally. Wallace became the target of online harassment in the traditionally white Southern sport after he got NASCAR to ban the Confederate flag at its events last year. Wallace broke down in tears after the win in his number 23 Toyota. That car number was picked for its co-owner, basketball superstar Michael Jordan, who wore 23 in the NBA. Well, that wraps it up for this Inside the Americas. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you again next time for all the news from north to south.
France 24 en español.
Pasa 24 horas
de difusión diaria.
24 horas para informarse
de toda la actualidad
de América Latina
y el mundo.
Todos los días desde el terreno
a través de nuestros noticieros
y programas hablamos
con los dirigentes del continente
y también de los que hacen la actualidad
política, económica,
artística y cultural
para ofrecerles una información
completa del mundo
que confronta
todos los puntos de vista.
Nuestras redacciones en América Latina
y en Francia
trabajan en estrecha colaboración
para estar siempre presente
en todos los eventos importantes
y proponerles
una mirada diferente.
France 24 en español.
Ahora
todo el día.
Liberté, égalité, actualité.